The story opens on a crisp Saturday morning in the master-planned community of Oakhaven Estates, where the autumn air smelled of mulched leaves and quiet ambition. Alex Miller, until recently a senior aerospace engineer, stood at the far corner of his backyard, a place where manicured lawn gave way to a gentle, oak-studded slope. Beside him, a surveyor named Mark adjusted the tripod of his theodolite, its lens glinting in the low sun. Alex's dream, born of necessity, was taking its first fragile steps. The layoff had been a shock, a sudden severance from a 2-decade career designing guidance systems. Now, his future lay in a different kind of precision, a small, detached workshop where he could launch a business machining custom parts for classic automobiles, a passion he hoped to turn into a lifeline. He held a laminated copy of his property survey, a document he'd studied for weeks. The proposed workshop location was perfect setback, partially concealed by a mature pin oak, and, according to the official plot plan from his closing documents, well within his lot line. Mark hammered a small wooden stake, topped with a strip of fluorescent pink ribbon, into the turf. "That's the rear corner pin," Mark said, his voice carrying easily in the morning quiet. "Legally, everything on this side is yours. You've got about 15 feet to spare before the designated common area begins." Alex felt a surge of relief. "That's what I thought. Just wanted a professional confirmation before I submitted the plans." "Always a smart move." Mark nodded. "Measure twice. Build once." As if summoned by the phrase, a figure emerged from the manicured walking path that bordered the common area behind Alex's property. It was Eleanor Vance, the HOA board treasurer, a woman whose presence was as meticulously curated as her prize-winning rosebushes. She wore cream-colored linen trousers and a navy blue cashmere sweater, an ensemble more suited for a yacht club luncheon than a weekend stroll. Her smile was a perfect, thin crescent, conveying a politeness that felt more like an assessment. "Good morning, Alex," she said, her voice light and melodic. She stopped just on the other side of the newly driven stake. Her gaze flickered from the surveying equipment to the plans in Alex's hand. "Getting an early start on a project." "Just doing some due diligence." "Eleanor," Alex replied, matching her pleasant tone. He had met her once at the neighborhood's 4th of July block party, where she had spent most of the time critiquing the potluck offerings, planning to submit an application for a small workshop here in the back. Eleanor's smile tightened by a fraction of a millimeter. A workshop? How industrious. She took a deliberate step forward, her expensive walking shoe pressing into the grass just inches from the pink ribbon stake. "I do hope you have board approval for activity on the common area." The shot was fired. It was so perfectly delivered, so wrapped in the guise of friendly concern, that it took Alex a moment to register the challenge. He pointed with his rolled-up plans to the stake at her feet. "According to the official survey, this is all well within my private lot," he said, keeping his voice steady. "The common area starts back there, by the lamppost." Eleanor's gaze followed his gesture, then returned to his face. Her eyes, a pale, chilly blue, held no warmth. The builder's handouts can sometimes be misleading. They're for marketing purposes. The board maintains the official map defining common and private property. We have to be very careful about protecting our shared spaces, especially those that fall within a designated view corridor. View corridor. The term was new to him. It sounded official, important, and vaguely threatening. "I wasn't aware this area was part of a view corridor." Alex said, "It's not mentioned in the CC&Rs I received." "It's a board-level designation," she replied smoothly, waving a dismissive hand as if swatting away a gnat of legal technicality. "To preserve the natural aesthetic of the hillside for all residents. Any construction here would be a significant issue. She gave him another one of her bloodless smiles. I'm just giving you a friendly heads up. Of course. To save you time and expense before you get too far along. You'll want to check with the Architectural Control Committee before you do anything else. She turned and continued her walk, her posture ramrod straight. The air she left behind felt suddenly colder. Mark, the surveyor, let out a low whistle. Well, then, he said, packing away a lens cap. Welcome to the neighborhood. Alex stared at the pink-ribbon stake, a tiny flag marking the first battle line in a war he hadn't known he was about to fight. Inside, the smell of brewing coffee and the faint scent of toast did little to dispel the chill of the morning's encounter. Alex spread his closing documents across the granite island in their kitchen. The plat map, a black and white rendering from the developer, clearly delineated Lot 74, his lot with solid lines. The common area was a shaded region labeled Area C, Common Space, Oakhaven HOA. The stake was planted firmly within the boundaries of Lot 74. His wife, Jessica, a high school science teacher with a pragmatic mind and a low tolerance for bureaucracy, looked over his shoulder. A view corridor, she asked, her brow furrowed. A view of what the back of the Hendersons' fence. That's what I'd like to know, Alex muttered, tracing the property line with his finger. She was polite, but it felt like a declaration of war. The layoff had put them in a precarious position. His severance package was generous, but not inexhaustible. Their savings were earmarked for their daughter's college fund. The workshop wasn't a hobby. It was Plan A, B, and C for their financial survival. The thought of it being derailed by a manufactured technicality sent a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. Later that afternoon, while trimming the hedges that lined his driveway, he saw his next-door neighbor, George Henderson, tending to his own meticulously ordered garden. George was a retired history professor in his late 70s, a man who had seen Oakhaven grow from a developer's blueprint into a living, breathing community. He was also, as Alex would soon learn, a trove of institutional knowledge. "Trouble in paradise?" George asked, leaning on his rake. His eyes, magnified by thick glasses, were shrewd and kind. Alex recounted his morning encounter with Eleanor Vance. George listened patiently, nodding slowly, a grim, knowing expression settling on his face. Ah, Eleanor and the view corridor, he said with a sigh. That's a classic. She trots that one out whenever someone wants to build a shed, a playset, or even plant a tree she doesn't like. So it's not a real thing. Oh, it's real in the sense that the board designated it in a meeting about 10 years ago. What's less real is where it's located. Its boundaries seem to shift depending on who's asking. George lowered his voice, leaning closer to the hedge. Let me give you some advice. Alex, the Vance's Eleanor and her husband, Robert, who runs the architectural committee. They've been on that board for the better part of 2 decades. They run this place like a private club. They see the CC&Rs not as a contract between neighbors, but as their personal book of commandments, which they are free to interpret as they see fit. So what do I do? Alex asked, feeling a fresh wave of despair. You document, George said, his voice firm. You create a paper trail. Every communication with them, from this point forward, is in writing. Every form you submit, you send via certified mail with a return receipt. You save everything, and you read the governing documents until you know them better than they do. They thrive on ambiguity and intimidation. Your only defense is precision. That evening, Alex sat in his home office, surrounded by the ghosts of his former career, a framed photo of a satellite launch, a lucite block containing a turbine blade he'd designed. He opened his laptop and pulled up the PDF of the Oakhaven Estates covenants, conditions, and restrictions. For hours, he read, his engineer's mind parsing the dense legalese. He highlighted passages, made notes, and cross-referenced sections. He focused on Article 8, architectural control and use restrictions on private lots, and specifically, Paragraph 8.4.2, structures and outbuildings. It laid out clear rules for setbacks, height limits, and materials, but granted homeowners broad rights for construction on their own property, subject to ACC approval of the plans. He then read Article 4, the common area, and its governing clause. Paragraph 4.1, use of common area. It strictly prohibited any private construction or alteration of common spaces. Eleanor was trying to reclassify his private property as a common area through a vague, unwritten designation. It was a clever, insidious strategy. The fight, he now understood, wouldn't be about stakes in the ground. It would be about words on paper. He typed up a polite, formal email to the HOA management company, attaching his survey and his preliminary plans, and respectfully requested clarification on the view corridor and its exact boundaries as defined in any official HOA document. He hit send, the small click of the mouse echoing in the quiet room like the cocking of a pistol. The paper trail had begun. The response, when it came a week later, was not the clarification Alex had requested. It was an official email from a generic address at Oakhaven Management Services. The subject line read, Courtesy Notice, Potential Unapproved Activity. The body of the email was brief and coldly formal. It noted that activity consistent with preliminary construction planning has been observed on or near the common area adjacent to Lot 74, and reminded him that any alteration to common areas required a multi-stage approval process. It referenced CC&R Favor 4.1. His specific question about the view corridor was completely ignored. George had been right. They were building a narrative, creating the first entry in a log of his supposed transgressions. They're ignoring your question and building their own case, Jessica said, reading the email over his shoulder. It's like arguing with a brick wall that can send you bills. A brick wall I have to get a permit from, Alex countered grimly. He refused to be deterred. He spent the next few days refining his workshop plans, ensuring they complied with every single written requirement in Paragraph 8.4.2, right down to the specified brand of exterior paint and the pitch of the roof. He compiled a complete submission package, architectural drawings, a materials list, the certified survey from Mark, and a cover letter that preemptively addressed every clause of the relevant CC&R. He would give them no legitimate reason to say no. He drove to the post office and sent the thick envelope to the management company via certified mail. Return receipt requested. The small green and white slip the clerk handed him felt like a talisman, a piece of irrefutable proof. They received it on this date, at this time. 10 days later, the other shoe dropped. It arrived not as an email, but as another certified letter, delivered by a mail carrier who now seemed to be a harbinger of doom. Alex signed the slip with a sense of dread. Inside the crisp envelope was a single sheet of heavy bond paper with the Oakhaven HOA letterhead. Formal violation notice. It stated that his submission of plans for a structure on a protected common area constituted a formal violation of CC&R Paragraph 4.1. It informed him that a hearing before the Architectural Control Committee had been scheduled to review the matter, and that failure to withdraw his application would result in further action, including the possibility of fines. The notice was signed by Robert Vance, chair of the ACC. The letter shook him. A courtesy notice was a warning. A formal violation was an indictment. They hadn't just denied his application. They had framed the act of applying as a crime. They were twisting the process itself into a weapon. He looked out his kitchen window toward the Vance's house, a sprawling two-story colonial that occupied a prime corner lot. He could see their backyard, a vast expanse of emerald lawn, a multi-tiered deck, and an ornate gazebo. It was the largest lot in the development. And now, he realized, they wanted more. That evening, he called George. "They've scheduled an ACC hearing," Alex said, the frustration evident in his voice. "Ah, yes, the Star Chamber," George replied dryly. "Robert Vance presiding. Be prepared. It's not a hearing. It's a formality. The verdict has already been decided." "So what do I do? Just let them steamroll me." "You go," George advised. "You state your case calmly and professionally. You present your evidence. You make it clear you know the rules. And you make sure you get a copy of the official meeting minutes afterward. Remember the paper trail. Even if you lose the battle, the record of it might help you win the war." The war, Alex thought, was escalating faster than he had ever imagined, and he was beginning to feel dangerously outgunned. The ACC hearing was held in a soulless, beige conference room at the offices of Oakhaven Management Services. The air was stale with the scent of cheap coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. Alex sat on one side of a long, polished table. On the other side sat Robert Vance, a man with a stern, angular face and the self-assured posture of someone who had never lost an argument on his home turf. Flanking him were two other committee members, a sycophantic-looking man who nodded at everything Robert said, and a woman who seemed determined to study the wood grain of the table. Eleanor Vance was not officially on the committee, but she sat in a chair against the wall, observing the proceedings with the placid expression of a judge watching a foregone conclusion. Alex had prepared meticulously. He had a binder with tabbed sections, the CC&Rs, the certified survey, his plans, photos of the site, and copies of all his correspondence. Robert Vance began without preamble. "Mr. Miller, we are here to discuss Violation Notice 2023-T47 regarding your application for a new structure on the common area designated as a protected view corridor." "Mr. Vance," Alex began, his voice calm and measured. "Before we proceed, I'd like to establish a key fact. My application is for a structure on my private lot, Lot 74. I have here a certified survey, conducted by a licensed state surveyor, confirming my property lines." He slid a copy across the table. Robert glanced at it for less than a second before pushing it back. An uncommissioned survey is not considered a valid document by this committee. The board's official map, which defines the view corridor, supersedes any third-party survey. "Could you please provide me with a copy of this official map?" Alex asked. "I've requested it twice in writing and have not received it." "The map is a board-level document, used for internal governance," Robert said dismissively. "It's not a public-facing record. The fact remains, that entire slope is considered a sensitive area under Board Resolution 9B, passed in 2013. Alex opened his binder. "I've reviewed all board resolutions available on the homeowner portal, and I can find no mention of Resolution 9B or a view corridor at this location. I'm referencing CC&R February 8.4.2, which governs structures on private lots." Robert cut him off, his voice edged with impatience. "Mr. Miller, we are not here to debate your interpretation of the governing documents. We are here to adjudicate a violation. You have submitted plans for construction in a prohibited area. The committee finds that the violation is valid." He looked at his two colleagues, who both mumbled their assent. "The application is denied, and the violation is upheld. You will receive a formal notice of the board's final decision, including any applicable fines. After our next executive session, this meeting is adjourned." He rapped his knuckles on the table. It was over. The entire hearing had lasted less than 10 minutes. They hadn't looked at his plans, hadn't considered his evidence, and had cited a secret map and a non-existent resolution. It wasn't a rigged game. It was a performance piece. They weren't just enforcing rules. They were demonstrating power. Alex sat alone in the beige room for a long moment. The useless binder opened before him. The cool, detached anger of the engineer was beginning to burn away, replaced by something hotter and more personal. He walked out of the management office into the bright afternoon sun, his mind racing. George was right. He had lost the battle. Now, he had to find a way to win the war. He couldn't do it by playing their game. He had to change the game itself. That night, Alex knew he had reached the limits of his own abilities. The Vances operated in a closed loop of their own making, citing secret documents and unwritten rules. To beat them, he needed to find a truth that existed outside their control, a truth anchored in public record. He remembered George's advice about the paper trail, but now he needed more than his own receipts. He needed theirs. The next morning, he made a call. George had recommended a local paralegal named Sarah Jenkins, a woman he described as a bloodhound for paperwork. Sarah's office was a cramped, cluttered space above a bakery, filled with stacks of legal binders and smelling faintly of old paper and fresh croissants. She was a woman in her 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that Alex found immediately reassuring. She listened to his story without interruption, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair. An HOA dispute. The 30-year war fought over the color of mailboxes, she said, a cynical smile touching her lips. Secret maps, non-existent resolutions. That's bold. I'll give them that. "Can you help me?" Alex asked. The only legally binding document that defines property lines is the official plat map filed with the county recorder's office when the development was created, she explained. Her voice, all business. It's a public record. Anything the HOA has is just a copy. And if it's different, it's legally irrelevant. Same goes for their meeting minutes. Under state law, they have to be maintained as corporate records, and in most cases, they have to be made available to homeowners. They can redact for certain things, like pending litigation or employee matters, but they can't just black out anything they don't like. "They're stonewalling me," Alex said. "Of course they are. That's the point." Sarah tapped a pen on her desk. "Here's what I can do. For a flat fee, I'll go to the county recorder's office myself. I'll pull the official, certified plat map for the Oak Haven subdivision, and I'll pull the complete record of every HOA board meeting minute they've ever filed. We'll see what their paper trail really says, not just the version they want you to see." Alex agreed without hesitation. It was an expense he couldn't really afford, but the alternative, losing his business before it even started, was unthinkable. A few days later, Sarah called. "You should come down to my office," she said, a new note of interest in her voice. "I think you'll find this educational." When Alex arrived, a large document tube and a thick accordion file sat on her desk. She carefully unrolled the document from the tube. It was the official plat map, a massive sheet of paper covered in precise, spidery lines and official-looking stamps. The surveyor's seal was embossed in the corner. "This," Sarah said, tapping the paper, "is the ground truth. No ambiguity." She pointed to Lot 74. The boundaries were exactly as Mark's survey had shown. The common area was clearly demarcated, its edge a good 15 feet from where Alex intended to build. There was no mention of a view corridor anywhere on the document. legally. They don't have a leg to stand on regarding the property line. That's great, Alex said, feeling a surge of vindication. It gets better, Sarah said, opening the accordion file. It was filled with photocopied meeting minutes, dating back years. I went through the minutes from 2013, the year Robert Vance claimed they passed Resolution 9B. There's no such resolution. He made it up. She then pulled out a single sheet, a copy of the minutes from a board meeting held 5 years ago. Several paragraphs in the middle of the document were crudely blacked out with a marker. This is what they have on file, and, presumably, what they'd give you if you requested it. She said, redacted for privacy. I'm sure. Alex stared at the black boxes. What are they hiding? He murmured. The question hanging in the dusty air of the office. A feeling of unease settled over him. This was no longer just about a procedural dispute. The heavy redactions felt like a confession. Sarah leaned forward, a hunter's glint in her eye. That's the question, isn't it? And I think I might have the answer. The twist came from a place Sarah Jenkins knew to look, and the Vances had long forgotten. Before an HOA can amend its declarations or make significant changes to common areas, it often has to file paperwork with various municipal or county planning commissions. These filings, Sarah explained, sometimes included draft documents or preliminary minutes as supporting evidence. They were public record, but obscure enough that most people never thought to check them. Sarah had spent an afternoon digging through the county planning archives, and there, attached to a denied application from the Oak Haven HOA dated 5 years ago, she found a draft copy of the redacted minutes, the unredacted, original version. She slid the two documents side by side on her desk. The black boxes on one sheet corresponded perfectly to the damning text on the other. Alex read the hidden paragraphs, his heart pounding with a mixture of anger and elation. It was all there, in the dry, formal language of a board meeting. Robert Vance had made a formal proposal for the HOA to purchase a 15-foot deep strip of undeveloped land directly behind his and Eleanor's property from the original developer. The proposal stated the purchase was for a community beautification project. Attached to the proposal was a landscape architect's sketch. The beautification project was an elaborate, multi-level stone patio with a built-in barbecue, a fire pit, and space for a large swimming pool, an extension of the Vances' own backyard, which would be screened from the rest of the community by a dense wall of cypress trees. The developer had refused to sell the land. The board, in a rare moment of fiscal sanity, before the Vances had consolidated their power, had voted the proposal down, citing the cost and the blatant personal benefit to the Vances. The redacted section contained the entire failed proposal. My God, Alex breathed. It was never about a view corridor. They tried to buy that land to expand their yard and were told no. Now they're just trying to take it. They're not trying to take it by changing the deed, Sarah clarified, her voice sharp. That's too hard. They're trying to seize control of it by fraudulently classifying it as a common area that they, as the board, govern. They can't build their pool, but they can stop you from building your workshop and keep the view from their back deck pristine. It's a spiteful, greedy land grab. Pure and simple. All the pieces clicked into place. Eleanor's immediate, aggressive challenge, Robert's fabricated resolution, the secret map. It was a long con, a campaign of misinformation designed to annex a piece of his property for their own benefit. They were using the full power of the HOA not to uphold community standards, but to settle a personal grudge against a developer who had denied them their prize years ago. Alex now had the truth. He had the irrefutable, public record evidence, the certified plat map, and the unredacted minutes. He had the motive. He had the lie. He felt a surge of confidence he hadn't felt in weeks. He finally had the weapons he needed to win the war. But as he would soon discover, the Vances had one more, far crueler weapon to deploy. Armed with his newfound evidence, Alex felt emboldened. He was preparing a formal, detailed response to the board, complete with copies of the plat map and the damning minutes. When the next certified letter arrived, this one was from a law firm, printed on heavy, cream-colored letterhead that screamed expensive. Notice of intent to place Lyon. The letter stated that due to his failure to pay the outstanding fine of $1,000, which was now accruing penalties of $100 per day, the Oakhaven Homeowners Association would begin legal proceedings to place a lien on his property. Lot 74. If the debt remained unpaid, the HOA could eventually foreclose. Reading the words, Alex felt the floor drop out from under him. This was no longer a battle of paperwork and procedure. A lien was a direct threat to his home, to his family's security. The Vances weren't just trying to win an argument, they were trying to ruin him. The pressure was immense, a physical weight on his chest. His workshop, his business, his future. It all felt like it was slipping through his fingers. That same afternoon, as if on cue, the Vances made their next move. It wasn't directed at him, but at the Millers, a young family who lived 2 doors down. The Millers had 2 small children and a backyard that was a testament to happy, chaotic family life. In the corner of their yard stood a charming cedar plank playhouse, a miniature version of their own home that Mr. Miller had built himself. A violation notice appeared on their door. The infraction, the peak of the playhouse roof, was 2 inches over the 6-foot side yard setback line for auxiliary structures. It was a minuscule, technical violation that had been ignored for over a year. Suddenly, it was an urgent matter requiring immediate remedy or a hefty fine. The connection was not lost on Alex. It was a flanking maneuver, a shot across the bow intended for him. He saw young Mrs. Miller in her front yard later that day, her face pale with worry. "We don't know what to do," she told Alex, her voice trembling slightly. "The fine is $500, and they said we have to tear it down or move it. But there's nowhere else for it to go. The kids are heartbroken." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They were punishing an innocent family to intimidate him. The final piece of their strategy fell into place that evening. Robert Vance approached Alex while he was taking out his recycling bins, his demeanor uncharacteristically congenial. "Alex, a word," he said, stopping by the curb. He gestured vaguely in the direction of the Miller's house. "Unfortunate business with the playhouse. Rules are rules. I'm afraid. The board has to be consistent." Alex said nothing, just watched him. "You know," Robert continued, lowering his voice conspiratorially, "the annual homeowners meeting is next week. It's an open forum. If a respected homeowner, someone like you, were to stand up and speak in favor of consistent enforcement, show that you're a team player who understands the importance of upholding our community standards, well, it would go a long way." The offer hung in the air between them, thick and poisonous. "And in return," Alex asked, his voice flat. Robert smiled, a thin, reptilian stretching of his lips. "I'm sure the board could be persuaded to find that a clerical error was made regarding your workshop application. Perhaps we could grant a hardship variance. Your little problem would simply disappear." There it was. The corrupt bargain. Sacrifice his neighbors, legitimize the Vance's tyrannical rule, and, in return, he would get what he wanted. For a fleeting second, the temptation was powerful. An end to the sleepless nights, the legal threats, the constant anxiety. An end to the fight. He could just take the deal. The Millers were not his responsibility. He looked past Robert's shoulder at the small, perfect playhouse, a symbol of everything a neighborhood should be: family, creativity, joy. And he looked at Robert Vance, a man willing to crush that for a few feet of grass. In that moment, his personal battle for a workshop transformed into something bigger. It wasn't just about his property anymore. It was about the soul of the community. Alex met Robert's gaze, his own eyes cold and hard as steel. "I think I'll take my chances at the annual meeting," he said, "and I suggest you prepare for it." He turned and walked back to his house, leaving Robert Vance standing alone at the curb as the evening shadows lengthened. The choice had been made. He would not just defend himself. He would liberate the entire neighborhood. The Oakhaven Estates annual homeowners meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a cavernous room with poor acoustics and the lingering smell of chlorine from the adjacent indoor pool. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile, greenish glow on the 50 or so homeowners seated in rows of metal folding chairs. At the front of the room, behind a long folding table, sat the board of directors. Robert and Eleanor Vance were in the center, flanked by their allies, looking serene and confident. A representative from the management company, a harried-looking woman named Carol, sat at the far end, taking minutes on a laptop. The agenda was a masterclass in bureaucratic tedium approval of the previous year's minutes. A treasurer's report from Eleanor filled with impenetrable spreadsheets. A report from the landscaping committee on the optimal pH for planting azaleas. It was designed to lull the audience into a state of benign stupor. Alex sat in the third row, a slim leather portfolio on his lap. Inside was his arsenal, the certified county plat map, rolled tightly in a cardboard tube, copies of the redacted and unredacted minutes for everyone in the room, and a printout of a single, explosive email. He had registered for a 5-minute speaking slot during the new business and homeowner forum section at the end of the agenda, as was his right under the bylaws. He knew he would have to be ruthlessly efficient. Finally, after an hour of droning reports, Robert Vance looked at the agenda. "That brings us to the homeowner forum. Each registered speaker will have 5 minutes. First on the list is Alex Miller." A flicker of something amusement annoyance crossed Robert's face. Alex walked to the simple wooden podium at the side of the stage. He placed his portfolio on it and connected his laptop to the projector. The Vances exchanged a look. This was more than they'd expected. "Good evening," Alex began, his voice calm and clear, carrying through the quiet room. "My name is Alex Miller, and I live at 214 Chestnut Drive. I'm here tonight to talk about the board's fiduciary duty and its responsibility to act with transparency and fairness." Robert Vance tapped his watch pointedly. "You have 5 minutes, Mr. Miller." "Thank you," Alex said. "I'll be brief." The projector whirred to life, displaying a simple title slide, "A Question of Property." He clicked to the next slide. It showed a side-by-side comparison of his property survey and the flimsy, unmarked map the HOA used. "For the past 6 weeks, I have been in a dispute with the board over the location of my rear property line," Alex explained. "The board has maintained, based on this unofficial map, that a portion of my private lot is, in fact, common area. They have used this claim to deny a building permit, issue violations, and threaten my family with a lien on our home." Murmurs rippled through the audience. A lien was a serious threat. "The board has repeatedly refused to provide me with their so-called official map. So I went to the county recorder's office and pulled the only map that has any legal standing." He reached into the cardboard tube, pulled out the massive, certified plat map, and unrolled it with a dramatic flourish, holding it up for all to see. "This is the official plat map of Oakhaven Estates. As you can see from the surveyor's seal and the county clerk's stamp. It is the ground truth, and it proves, unequivocally, that the land in question belongs to me. He let the visual sink in. The sheer size and official nature of the map made it irrefutable. Robert's face had hardened. Eleanor's smile was gone. The board's claim, therefore, is false, Alex continued, his voice gaining strength. Which begs the question, why would they knowingly pursue a false claim with such aggression? He clicked to the next slide. On the screen appeared the redacted meeting minutes from 5 years prior. The answer, it turns out, is also in the public record. This is a copy of the board's minutes from May 2018. As you can see, a key section has been blacked out. He clicked again. The unredacted version appeared next to it. He used a laser pointer to highlight the damning paragraph. This is the unredacted version, which I found in the county planning archives. It details a proposal made by Mr. and Mrs. Vance for the HOA to purchase that exact strip of land behind their house in order to build a large private patio and pool complex at community expense. The proposal was denied. Gasps echoed through the room. Neighbors turned to look at each other, their expressions a mixture of shock and dawning anger. The Vances' long-running obsession with that piece of land was no longer a mystery. It was a documented case of personal greed. "You're out of order," Robert Vance shouted, banging his gavel on the table. "Your 5 minutes are up. This is a private matter." "Let him speak," a voice yelled from the back. It was George. Soon, others joined in. "Let him finish." The management rep, Carol, was staring at the Vances, her face ashen. She knew exactly what a documented case of self-dealing and fraudulent enforcement meant in a courtroom. Alex held up a hand for quiet. "I have one more thing." He clicked to his final slide. It was a screenshot of an email. This is an email from John O'Malley, of O'Malley Landscaping, the contractor who lost the bid for the new community entrance project last year. He sent it to me yesterday, after hearing about my case. In it, he details how our board president, Robert Vance, solicited a 10% kickback in cash in exchange for guaranteeing O'Malley the contract. The room erupted. The accusation was no longer about property lines or petty tyranny. It was about outright corruption. Shouts of resign and audit filled the air. Robert Vance was pale, speechless. Eleanor looked as if she had been slapped. Alex stepped back from the podium, his 5 minutes of truth delivered. The slow, methodical work of the past 6 weeks had culminated in this single, explosive moment. The Vances' carefully constructed kingdom was crumbling around them, brought down not by shouting or threats, but by the quiet, undeniable power of the facts. The clubhouse descended into controlled chaos. Homeowners were on their feet, shouting questions at the stunned and silent board members. George Henderson, his voice booming with the authority of a seasoned professor, formally made a motion from the floor. "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in Board President Robert Vance and Treasurer Eleanor Vance." Seconded came a chorus of voices. Carol, the management company representative, saw the tidal wave of legal liability about to crash down on her firm. She quickly stood up and took the podium, speaking into the microphone with an air of decisive authority. "Given the serious nature of the evidence presented by Mr. Miller," she announced, her voice cutting through the din, "Oakhaven Management Services recommends an immediate freeze on all pending violation notices and fines issued by the current Architectural Control Committee, pending a full, independent review." She looked directly at Alex, and then at the Millers, who were huddled together in the back row. That includes the fines against Lot 74 and the Miller family. Furthermore, we support the motion for a vote of no confidence and will facilitate an emergency election for new board members. The vote was a landslide. The Vances were stripped of their titles by an overwhelming majority, a public humiliation that was more devastating than any fine. A second motion, also proposed by George, called for a full forensic audit of the HOA's finances for the past 10 years, to be conducted by an outside accounting firm. It, too, passed with near-unanimous support. Robert and Eleanor Vance sat frozen at the head table as their 2-decade reign dissolved in under 10 minutes. They didn't speak, didn't defend themselves. They simply gathered their papers with trembling hands and exited through a side door, pursued by the angry glares of the neighbors they had lorded over for so long. In the aftermath of the meeting, the community felt galvanized. Neighbors who had previously only exchanged polite waves were now talking, comparing stories, and organizing. An interim board was quickly established, with George Henderson reluctantly agreeing to serve as a temporary advisor. The audit, when it was completed weeks later, uncovered years of financial mismanagement and self-serving contracts, including the landscaping kickback scheme. The HOA's insurance carrier, facing a clear case of breach of fiduciary duty, initiated a lawsuit against the Vances to recoup the mismanaged funds. Faced with legal bills and social ostracization, the Vances put their house on the market and quietly moved away. A few months later, on another crisp morning, Alex stood at the same spot in his backyard. The foundation for his workshop had been poured, the framing was up, and the scent of fresh-cut lumber replaced the memory of conflict. His permit, one of the first, approved by the new, transparent ACC, was displayed proudly in his front window. The Miller family's playhouse was safe, and their children's laughter once again filled the air between the houses. The oppressive cloud of scrutiny that had hung over Oakhaven had lifted, replaced by a renewed sense of community. At the next quarterly HOA meeting, held in the same clubhouse, but with a dramatically different atmosphere, Alex once again took his 5-minute slot at the podium. He wasn't there to present evidence or fight a battle. He was there to build something. My experience with the board showed me how easily our governing documents can be twisted when there's no transparency. He said to the attentive crowd, "A community shouldn't be governed by secret maps and unwritten rules. It should be governed with fairness and openness." He proposed a new bylaw amendment he had drafted with George and Sarah's help. He called it the Community Transparency and Fair Dispute Resolution Act. It had 2 simple provisions. First, all board meeting minutes, financial statements, and governing resolutions were to be posted in a searchable, unredacted format on the community website within 48 hours of any meeting. Second, it established a simple, low-cost arbitration process, mediated by a neutral third party, for any homeowner who wished to dispute a violation, taking the ultimate power out of the hands of a potentially biased board. The amendment was put to a vote. It passed unanimously. As the meeting concluded, people came up to Alex, shaking his hand, thanking him. He hadn't sought to be a leader, but by refusing to back down, he had become one. He had fought for his workshop, but in doing so, had secured something far more valuable for everyone, a community where the rules served the residents, not the other way around. His victory wasn't just in the workshop taking shape in his yard, but in the quiet confidence on the faces of his neighbors. He had used the system to fix the system, and in doing so, had truly made Oakhaven a home,